And they're off in the Kentucky Derby. History is made from the Arc to the Breeders' Cup. Olympiad with those powerful strides flourishes in the Foster. It's a wild finish in the Kentucky Derby, and on the wire, Rich Strike does it. Wow, a shocker in the Kentucky Derby.
On that note, I think you may have a preview of who we got in studio here with us today on Inside the Kentucky Derby. Welcome back. And of course, Inside the Kentucky Derby would not be possible without our friends at Woodford Reserve with 200 flavor notes in every sip. Woodford Reserve is a spectacle for the senses. Please enjoy responsibly. Darren, we're joined by royalty here today.
Big guest.
Big
guest.
Big time guest.
Not quite royalty.
Do you still get nervous on that?
Well, who's our guest?
Well, Travis Stone, if you can't hear. That's the most iconic voice I think we have. No one cares about our voice. This is Travis Stone. Everyone knows Travis's voice, except for my wife. She always mistakes you with another announcer. I won't say who, but she's like, is that Travis? No, that's not Travis. Travis Stone, here and guest, the official voice of Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby. Of course, we heard some of his calls right there in the intro here on Inside the Kentucky Derby. Do you still get nervous when you hear that Rich Strike call at the very end of gasping for air almost, of making sure you identified him correctly?
I thought I was having a stroke, and that's not an exaggeration. I got this like shooting pain up my back in my head, and I was like, "Oh, this is it! Like,
this is done. Why Durkin retired."
Yeah, this is the big one.
That was not fun. You just have to trust and put faith in all of your preparation, and you see red and white. And you see a saddle cloth that you're not used to seeing, which has got to be, not number two. Number two was a Happy Jack with with the black silks, and you just trust that you're right. And thank God I was.
Coin flip landed in your favor.
It did. I'd like to think it was a little bit more than a coin flip.
Yeah,
I wasn't drawing dead, put it that way. But yeah.
It's funny because you go back and you watch that Derby and you listen to your call, and this Derby, I think, was more intriguing from a race caller's perspective than the previous Derbies that you've had on your tenure here. Just there's so many moves in that Derby. How difficult was it overall to call that race compared to some of your other Derbies?
Well, I mean, everybody knows you got 2 minutes, right? So you just need those 2 minutes to go smoothly. And the minute something gets knocked off kilter or just doesn't seem right, you can feel it and you can sense it. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I think the opening quarter was 21-3, like 21.78 seconds or something like that. And as a race caller, when you see a bunched group of horses go by you the first time, there's not like a 5-length runaway leader, and you see a 21.78, you're like, is that time even right? And now you're off. You've totally lost your rhythm. But at the same time, you go on with it and you say, okay, I'm going to trust these times. And sure enough, it was right. It was a wild opening quarter to a wild half, which leads you to what announcers fret about, particularly in the Derby, is just the chaotic result where there's going to be 9 or 10 horses making moves, and whoever makes the last move wins. And that's exactly what happened.
I know you love to tell a story, in every race, but the Derby, you have 20 horses in the field. Tell us about each chapter. Like, what's your goal going into the first turn? What are your goals down the backstretch? And obviously, I think it probably just unfolds once they get to the track kitchen.
Yeah. So, and I'll credit Tom Durkin for giving me some advice on this that was absolutely crucial, and I'll try and weave that in. But the first objective is get him out of the gate and make sure nobody fell off, nobody stayed in the gate, nothing goofy happened. You establish the early positions and the early front runners in that first furlong, and then right around the 8th pole, right about when they're hitting the Twin Spires, is when you reset to the front and you get into what I call the rundown. And that's this horse is first, this horse is second, this horse is third, this horse is fourth on the outside, 5th on the inside, whatever. And that takes you a long time. It'll take you a good half a mile. I mean, it's not till they hit the backstretch where you get through the entire field. I am a big proponent of giving the position of the horse so there's some context. And as I've called more derbies, getting more confident and willing to describe a little bit more in that early part. And then when you get to the backstretch, you look at the tote board, or you look at your TV, you get the half-mile time. And this is what Durkin said to me. He goes, you're going to panic because getting through that field takes so long. And he's you get to the 12th horse and the 13th horse, and you're going to be like, oh my God, there's just no way I can do this. 15th and 16th horse, and now he says you'll feel your knees start to shake, and like your voice is going to tremble. It's like, oh, I've lost it. I've screwed it up. 18, 19, whatever, 20th horse, you finally get there. He goes, and you'll look up, you'll get the half-mile time, and then you just call a horse race for 5 furlongs. And I mean, it sounds sort of simplistic when it's the Derby, but it is such a true. Once you get to that 5 furlong marker, you're like, okay, let's just call this race. Let's just call this race.
Gut from there on out.
Yep. And then you hope that you see the moves, pick up the moves. If the half-mile time is really quick, you want to go back on the far turn farther, try and catch horses that are 17th, that are now making their way to 15th, on the way to 13th, because they are win candidates in a fast-paced race. If they went slow early, it's less likely so. And then,
How much of the preparation? So, like for this Derby, for instance, the Rich Strike Derby 148, you use terms like, beneath the twin spires for the first time. It was a merciless pace. What goes into that preparation of trying to find, the right terminology to describe different types of scenarios and races, especially the Derby?
Yeah, so I'll start with the last round of preps. Every horse gets a page in a notebook with all sorts of categories of phrases and words, descriptors, what have you, ideas of what they might say if they win. And almost everything that comes out during the call that is not a very, standard is first, is second, or whatever, was sort of thought of. So if I remember this year, Mo Donegal, I said is lingering because I felt like Donegal lingering, the double L sound, would sound kind of cool. I think I said Pratt is patient with Zandon at one point. That, that was sort of in mind. Epicenter running for the roses off the turn. I wish you had won, because I like that line. I was happy with that one.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and then he lost.
Yeah.
Sorry, KK.
Yeah,
so like all of that stuff is thought of. Fast paces, I've got an idea for like 4 or 5 levels of pace, and you just shove it all in there, and you hope that it comes out when it counts. And sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does, and you just try and get through it.
You've called the Derby at Churchill Downs since 2015. Your first was American Pharaoh. What a great maiden breaker for you. But are there any moments in the Derbies you've called where you've been surprised or caught off guard, or
Rich Strike. That was surprising. I'm trying to think like scenarios or situations that, maybe, so going back,
like what about owners with, common ownership who like to wear the same cap?
Yes.
Like, what do you do? What are you looking at?
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples of that. One was, so remember when Justify won? There was Justify, and who's the horse that got nailed for second by Good Magic?
Audible,
yeah. Both Windstar type colors. I remember they turned for home, and I, obviously I'd been calling Justify in front the whole time, but when they turn into the stretch, you don't really see anything, so you have to have an idea of who it is. And I remembered I zoomed in and saw that infamous blue shadow roll. Mm-hmm. So that was one of those moments like, hey, blue shadow roll, this is Justify. In the Nyquist Derby, was it My Man Sam and Exaggerator, right? I think those, yeah. So remember the sun popped out finally that day, and on the far turn, both of Exaggerator and My Man Sam were sort of making moves, but Exaggerator was one really making a move. But the way the sun hit his silks, it washed out that darker green and made it look like sort of a lighter bluish tealish color, which is My Man Sam's colors. But because I've seen Kent DeSormo ride races my entire life, I recognize Kent DeSormo's riding style, and you go on with it. Like, you just hope that you're right, So stuff like that, you just sort of think about. Or Vino Rosso in that Justified Derby. Mm-hmm. I mean, his silks were completely black. You couldn't see a thing. The same, you sort of make a guess and you go with it.
What about, so after this Derby, you're gasping for air, you're thinking you're having a stroke, and then you still have to call 2 races after the Derby. Mm-hmm. How soon after the Derby will you go back and listen to your call?
This year I went back, listened to the replay right away because I was worried I didn't have Rich Strike right. Whatever. Depends. I mean, not every year will I listen to it right away. Sometimes I'll wait till later on. But also your senses are so heightened and you're so clued in and tuned in that you know how it went. You know what you didn't like that you said or what you did like that you said, and so yeah.
How about this year with the Oaks? That had to be one of the more special moments. It's a tagline none of us will forget.
Yeah. So there's an example. So I remember I was in New York for the winter, and Secret Oath was on her way to obviously going to be in the Oaks at some point. And my dad used to always say, when I was a kid, Wayne can train, because he'd win all these races growing up. And like for me, that Wayne, Baffert, Zito era, that was when I got into racing. That was, every year was such a cool story. And my dad would always say, Wayne can train. And I was like, man, if Wayne Lucas won the Oaks, it'd be pretty cool. And I was like, oh, Wayne can still train. And so I wrote it on her notebook sheet. And I sort of forgot about it. Like I hadn't really thought about it. And then I just happened to open up that binder Oaks Day. I was just looking through all the past notes, trying to make sure. And then I said, oh man, wow. Yeah, that's a great line. And sure enough, she won.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah.
And he can still train.
He can.
Yeah.
You don't forget.
That was quite the moment. What about Derby calls that you would go back and change? Would you change anything in some of your Derby calls that you've done so far?
You're hard on yourself.
Yeah. The Medina Spirit, my voice, Medina Spirit week got weaker as the week went on. So I learned I needed to take care of the voice a little bit more. So it cracked a little bit. Did not like that. The Rich Strike cracked a little bit, but I don't care because that was just
I think that brought
absurd.
I think that brought emotion to it.
I'm trying to think some other ones. I like the Justify call. Farrell call was fine. The Nyquist call could have been better. I just didn't like how anything came out there. And then there's just a bunch of like little interior things that I just notice and I just don't like or whatever. But
what were some of the things for the Medina Spirit voice crack that you did? Because I know you're hard on yourself.
Yeah, so
what did you do to?
I am a religious Ricola consumer. I should own stock. I do have a T-shirt now, but so I started consuming more of those. This was the hardest part. I cut out beer starting on Wednesday.
Whoa!
So yep.
This is breaking news. I did not know this.
No evening beverages, and I limited myself to 1 cup of coffee in the morning. I used to never drink coffee Derby week or Derby weekend, but you get a little bit more used to some of it, so you can handle it more. But also, I made sure that I just did nothing but pound water. So I think Derby Day, I lined up 20 waters on my table, and I made sure that I consumed. Because Derby Day obviously is very long, so it was like at least 1 or 2 between each race to ensure that the voice was nice and then pre-record. We have so many ridiculous announcements for all the sponsors and stuff. So like pre-record all those earlier in the week and not have to get on the mic ideally at all.
That's good.
What about Derby Day? So Derby Day, you've got the buildup obviously to the Derby. When do the nerves start to hit you? Is saying, this is the Derby, making sure that you're prepared. Is it after, the Old Forester? Or does it sort of build up to
It definitely builds up throughout the day. You feel it. You're like, okay, there's another race down. We're another race closer. But it is after the Old Forester. There's a few very big moments. One is the walkover when you just feel it. There's tension, there's excitement, and you see all the horses walking by. And then the next is, I don't listen to my Old Kentucky Home. I hear the bugle call because I have to do a cue. But when they come on the track and you're like, now you're starting to memorize horses, the first time you've seen all 20 of them on the track together. And as a race caller, that's crunch time. You already have them memorized ahead of time, but now you're like, okay, that looks a little bit more orange than I thought. And you just start to think about those things. And then when they start to line up to walk over to the gate, it's like, okay, go time.
Is it difficult with sort of more time in the post parade to where they're loading into the gate on the Derby than other races to, they're sort of on the track more, so you it's a lot more mental.
You just think about it more.
Yeah.
It weighs on you. Paddock to post, maybe that'd be better. No time to think about it. You know,
that's not going to happen.
No. The other thing is, they warm up on the far turn, and that's the one point of the way farthest from the booth, and so you are having to look through the binoculars, and and that makes it a little bit more tricky, as opposed to other races where they warm up more close to the booth and make it easier.
Aside from the Derby, what do you think are some of your most memorable calls that you've had here at Churchill? We played Enable. I thought the Olympiad call was pretty awesome in the Foster.
Yeah, so this year, I made a concerted effort this year to work on a few different parts of my race calls. Got into some more routines with like watching replays and taking notes and stuff. And a few things that came out in that Olympiad ad call, I was very proud of. The stuff I'd been working on, so that was one. The Hot Rod Charlie Rich Strike Lucas Classic was, an awesome race. I got some flack for that because everybody said it was obvious that Hot Rod Charlie had won. But when you're race calling and you're in the middle of a line that's going to get you to the wire, and all of a sudden, like, one horse digs in, and I mean, he obviously won. But I was like, what am I going to do? Like, go back and just call this horse a winner by a nose? I mean, I was happy with that one. So yeah, I mean, it's more recent stuff. Like, if I go back to the 2015-16 calls, I'm like, you had to get better and you start to work on stuff. And so I'm more proud of the.
Yeah, but that's your craft, right?
Yeah, exactly,
I mean, the more times you do things.
Yep. It's
you continue to get better.
Golfer wants to putt more to get better at putting. And so I'd work on the race calls to get better race calling.
Well, we work on our podcasting a little bit and we try and get better on.
Well, again, if you're listening to the podcast on your platform, please write a review. And we would appreciate a 5-star review for our 4-star performance. That's what we would love.
Give yourself more credit than that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking the Derby here on Inside.
Well, let's talk this year's Derby.
Yeah, right. Let's move on. I mean,
you've heard our voices.
Right.
We need another opinion on this podcast to see where we kind of stand. We're 12 weeks out of the Kentucky Derby, and the 3-year-old picture is starting to come into a little sharper focus with these races each week.
Yeah, it's this week we're going to have the rerun Withers, which was postponed last week because of the Aqueduct cancellation, the El Camino Real Derby, and then also the Sam Davis down in Tampa. I think the most intriguing race out of those three, Darren, is the Sam Davis, because that can lead to horses either coming back and starting in the Florida Derby or using their local prep down there, the Tampa Bay Derby, to sort of vault either into the Derby from there, or maybe they'll run in the Bluegrass. We've seen that more recently too, of horses that have done the 3 preps, and it would be the Sam Davis, the Tampa Bay Derby, and the Bluegrass. WNL returns in this spot after his half-length victory in the Remsen for Danny Gargan. I don't think he necessarily has to win this race. He's the headliner, I believe, of the Sam Davis, which will go as race 10 on Saturday's card down at Tampa Bay Downs, 5:18 p.m. Eastern time. The post there, but this is a competitive field of 3-year-olds in here. 12 signed on.
It is. I have to admit, of all the Derby weekends we've had these preps, we have 3 of them. I'm a tad underwhelmed this weekend. I'm going to be looking for horses to see which ones have the ability to step forward. Can they compete with some of the bigger name horses? But either way, let's just take the race, as you said, in its own right. This is a very competitive group of 12. Is the Derby winner in here? I'm not sold. I'm not sold that he's in any of the 3 races this weekend, but WNL is a horse that I might try to beat. He's been off for 10 weeks after winning the Remsen. That of course came in the slop. He was held out of the Jerome. They've waited for this spot. Arctic Arrogance is going to be the horse to beat up in the Withers. Those were the 2 big boys last fall up at in New York, post Breeders' Cup. I'm underwhelmed. I mean, I think I told you going into last weekend, I was looking forward to Classic Car Wash being a part of the pace a little bit in the Holy Bull. He scratched out of there in favor of this. He gets an extra week. So now it's, 5 weeks between races. Horse is going to be forwardly placed. Should be a little bit of a price in here. I'm kind of leaning towards Classic Car Wash in a wide open affair. I don't know. We could go over different horses. Travis, what are your thoughts on the Sam Davis?
To me, the Remsen just comes with a question mark because it was run over a sloppy track. The pace was soft. He was right on top of it. They dueled to the wire, but that's fine. They're supposed to, sitting off a slow pace like that. And taking a horse first back for its 3-year-old start at short odds, coming off a soft trip, I just think it's a good spot to sort of take a stab against. I mean, I don't have a really strong opinion. I think the pace is going to be quick, provided there's no significant scratches. Yep. And we've seen a lot of these sort of West Coast Florida races on the road to the Derby kind of pop with some interesting results here or there because of the way the paces tend to shake out. This probably doesn't have a Derby winner in it, but it's a very compelling race because there's a lot going on, and it's part of what makes the road to the Derby fun, Because even, you know, what we would consider, I don't want to call it second rate, that's not the right term, second tier prep, not a primary prep, can produce some interesting results and just get the chatter going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Prairie Hawk may not get a lot of respect in this race, just because he, you know, won in wire-to-wire fashion in a very slow pace in the local allowance race that was the prep for here, and it was, you know, only a 4-horse field where, you know, you had the two Pletcher trainees, and Prairie Hawk ended up taking the field wire-to-wire. He doesn't necessarily have to have the lead, but I think he showed in his maiden win that he's able to track off horses, and he sports a 46 and 2 half-mile work at Gulfstream. And the intriguing thing about him entering this race that some bettors could be paying attention to is at Palm Meadows, where he's based, they didn't train there for 10 days. And so Saffie Joseph has horses at both Palm Meadows and Gulfstream Park. He had to ship Prairie Hawk over to Gulfstream Park in order for him to train because he was based at Palm Meadows. So I don't know if he missed any training, but I do think that maybe he'll be a little bit, you know, of a play in here, considering if WNL goes off as a favorite.
With all the speed in here, and or at least forwardly placed horses, you know, trying to envision this race a little bit, maybe Dreaming of Kona is going to go from the 10 hole. You think on the outside, Zydeco is going to have to go. It's going to force possibly some of these horses, you know, to be wide. I mean, WNL probably going to be between horses. A horse like Noda is probably going to be hung out wide. A Litigate is going to be interesting where he's going to be positioned for Todd Pletcher. You figure he is going to take some money just because of the connections alone, but I could see them going wide into the first turn and flushed out a little bit.
What about Classic Legacy? Mott's going really well. It's been going really well for a while. Has been improving with each and every start.
That was that same card. That was that first race on Remsen Day, and so, it was a sloppy track. He broke real well out of that, out of the gate, and then just kind of tracked the leader. He had a perfect trip. He surged clear late, but I'm just not convinced what was behind him. He looked good doing it.
That's fair.
He looked good doing it, but I'm not sure what was in that field.
The half brother to Art Collector's Classic Legacy, owned and bred by Bruce Lunsford. You know, I thought the slot may have moved him up as well, too, in that race. And he did earn a career best 91 Brisnet speed rating out of that race. He is going in the right direction. I just am a little bit tentative of what was behind him. I saw some of his early works from Saratoga. They underwhelmed me. That doesn't mean a horse can't improve from early on in their 2-year-old year to now 3.
I'm going to stick with Mark Cassie. I think he'll be a little bit of a price in here with Classic Car Wash. You know, this horse looks, you know, he last time out over the synthetic, he just loped around out there. I mean, it was very slow, 24-3, 49. I fully expect this horse to be more mid-pack tomorrow. And Mark has had success down at Tampa Bay. He always loves that route. He should be a little bit of a price. I'm leaning that direction only because I believe it's a wide open race.
Yeah, his other trainee in here, Champion's Dream, who ran second in the Pasco last time out, the Zydeco, who looks to be one of the pace setters in this field. I do think that maybe he would do better stretching out. He's by Justify out of the Tappet mare. And Tyler Gaffleone, who's based down at Gulfstream Park, will take off his mounts that day to come up and ride. So lures Tyler Gaffleone on Champion's Dream, who's an intriguing play. Also has an easier ship over to Tampa from the Ocala-based Cassie Training Center. So along with another Cassie Training Center, Wonder Wheel, who's going to be in the Suncoast. That's a fun duel in the Suncoast, guys, with Julia Shining and Wonder Wheel. It really, you know, I don't think of the Suncoast year in and year out as a major race on the road to the Kentucky Oaks, but I think Saturday Suncoast could be a big player for the Oaks picture going forward.
If you're a Wonder Wheel fan, you're going to get a great price on her because there's a lot of buzz on Julia Shining, and numbers-wise, she's 10, 12 points slower.
This is the old eye test versus the numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
She has produced, you know, a lot of buzz, and Wonder Wheel is going to be a decent price. You're right.
Yeah, it's Wonder Wheel breaks from the rail, post position 1 in race 9, the Suncoast, $150,000 for the 3-year-old fillies. 4:48 post time. Julia Shining breaks from the outside at post number 9. Triple Crown nominated. Julia Shining, one of 2 fillies nominated to the Triple Crown. Up in New York, the Withers, which was postponed last week, now running again this week. 7 3-year-olds in the Withers on the redrawn Withers. Arctic Arrogance from the rail, who's been second his last 2 starts in both the Remsen and the Jerome. He's going to be a major player in this race, and adding the blinkers for Linda Rice. He has the interesting pattern of going the mile to the mile and an eighth to the mile back to the mile and an eighth. This is a tough race for me to decipher. I'm not an Arctic Arrogance fan, but I can see where he is a horse to beat in this field.
He's a fun horse. I mean, he's done well for their ownership group, banking $260,000, running first or second in each of his 5 starts. It was a merry-go-round race last time in the Jerome. Couldn't get by Lugan Knight on the outside. He was the 6-5 favorite. Brad Cox shipped Lugan Knight in for the win, and just that might be a little more telling as to what the quality differential of maybe some Kentucky / Louisiana based horses versus the Northeast. And I'm going to use that angle to my advantage here in this race. I think there's going to be a fast pace in here. I think Arctic Arrogance is going to be going 90% Maddie, thinking to go from 7/8 to 9 furlongs is going to be forwardly placed. Andiamo off Forenzi on the outside, probably going to show some more lick from the outside. The 2 is proved right. It's probably going to be close as well. Jungfrau for Bill. Travis, you mentioned Bill Mott. He's going right. This horse from Juddmonte Farm, a son of Arrogate. Last time out, he sat on the outside, broke from that outside position, and he sat second. Expect More, who probably the most unluckiest maiden in North America among the Triple Crown nominees right now. He was in that big, the Arabian Night race, his maiden breaker at Keeneland. He was the horse that broke horribly and exploded to run a distant third, but it was a good third. Gets DQ'd this race versus Jungfrau, for drifting out late. I don't know. I thought it was a nice race. Game Change, who came back and won. That horse finished 4th in there. I'm going to take a little bit of a mild upset. I expect him probably be, the second choice in here, maybe the third choice behind, Hit Show, who's also going to be a player. How do you see it, Travis?
I have nothing creative. I think Hit Show wins. I just think this is a good horse that won on debut. Whenever you see a horse win on debut like that, obviously signals ability. I forgive the second to last start here at Churchill. Not the best of trips. Bounced right back with another big win. Figures going in the right direction. And this is sort of, not to be a homer, but we can all admit that the best racing on dirt in the country is in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those horses move down to Oaklawn. So I just think he classes up against this group and he fits numbers wise. And I think there's enough to like about Arctic Arrogance to pull some money off of Hit Show to allow his price to drift up just a little bit.
It doesn't show it on the PP line, but in his last start, he hesitated a little bit at the start. The race before, he bobbled. Obviously, it didn't affect him there, but that's my lone concern about Hit Show is getting out of the gate. But then again, if I think there's a lot of speed in here, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, with each passing start, you worry about that. If this were the Derby, obviously be a huge negative. But a smaller field like this with not much going on outside of the core contenders, I'm not as concerned.
Yeah, and I think Manny Franco will move him up out of the gate a little bit from his previous riders as well. The El Camino Real Derby out in Northern California is the final Derby prep race of the day, 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time post, race number 8 at Golden Gate Fields. 2 Triple Crown nominated horses in this race. Gilmore on the inside, who looks to be the likely heavy favorite, and Nullarbor on the far outside, both currently trained by Bob Baffert, ineligible at this time to gain points on the road to the Kentucky Derby. This could maybe have a shipper come for the Tapeta Surface on the Jeff Ruby Stakes. That's what's the intriguing part of the El Camino Real Derby for me, Darren, is maybe a horse will ship east for the Tapeta.
Yeah, you never know. Ron Bauer took this route a few years back, and you just don't know who's going to show up. The one horse I like in here the most, I think the favorite's probably going to be Harson for Steve Sherman. owned by Jerry Moss, owned and bred by Jerry Moss, and sent it up north. He's unbeaten in 2 starts. That's probably the horse to beat. I was a little surprised Chase the Chaos wouldn't be a Triple Crown nominated. But anyway, I'm going to lean towards Chase the Chaos in here for Ed Mosier Jr., thinking that he'll probably be the second choice, but proven over the route of ground. And I don't know. I like the way he did it last time out. Hassern trying 2 turns for the first time. No strong opinion on Tapeta.
The Jerry Moss tie-in is kind of random.
Right?
Yeah, who would have thought that? The horse is obviously good. The problem is I think there's a couple other horses that want to be forward in here, and one of those 2 Baffert horses is going to lap onto him early in the race because that's how they tend to run. So I sort of like the off-the-pace type scenario. This is the type of race I'd key a horse in 3rd and 4th at big odds and try and get a little bit of goofiness on the top end of a dime super.
That's your play, isn't it?
It is every day.
Yeah.
When I play, I like to find
like a little reverser.
Yeah, a little long shot closer to pick up the pieces at 20, 30 to 1.
But you like to bet, but I know you don't bet the races you call, though. Correct?
I don't. No, I've never.
Just explain the reason behind it. I know why.
Yeah, if you ever meet an announcer that says they bet the races they call and they tell you that they can be objective, they are lying through their teeth. They are lying through their teeth. Call them out. It's nonsense. You cannot be objective when you've got money on, and you cannot deliver a good call when you're keeping one eye on the horse that you bet. And I'll give you a quick story. When I first started callings, maybe my 3rd year calling, there was a horse that I bet that had a tough trip on turf, and I was like, ooh, noticed it. Next time around, I'm going to bet him. And I did. And then he had a perfect trip, and he won like at 4 or 5 to 1 out, whatever. The name was Pioneer something, Lion, Tiger, something like that. And a good friend of mine, Nick Tamero, called me up. He goes, "Did you bet that horse?" And that was the last bet I ever made on a race that I called.
Well,
at least it was a winning one, not the,
I went
not
out
the
on top.
reverse.
And when I was a George Costanza, I'm out of here. Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
well, speaking of gambling, if you're playing some of the reversers and playing some supers and load up your Twin Spires account, Kentucky Derby Future Wager pool number 4 is this weekend. 40 interest, including number 40, which is all of the 3-year-olds that are not listed in the individual 39 horses on the Future Wager. We have one filly that we put on there of Hoosier Filly, who's been very exciting and a lot of buzz around her. And so we've had the all fillies as number 39 in the previous 3 pools. We just put Hoosier Filly as the lone filly here in pool number 4. What have you seen so far, Travis, on the Triple Crown Trail on the road to the Kentucky Derby and, the horses that are listed here in the Future Wager? Who has impressed you the most so far within the 39 individual interests that are listed? I left off a big horse that's been impressive to all of us, but out of these 39,
a couple of them.
Yeah. There's a few off the list.
Who are the big boys?
I hope that he comes back in good form because I think Forte is an excellent racehorse. He has done everything right, and he has been. I've just really enjoyed watching him. He responded to the stretch out. He overcame a pretty good field to win the race at Keeneland last fall. I watched him win at Saratoga. I think he's a good horse, and he's in the right barn for that. Speaking of that barn, is it Tapetrice? However,
Tapetrice?
Tapetrice. It might be Trice.
Okay.
We'll find that out as the trail wanders on.
Because if you don't tap it once, you don't tap it twice. You tap it twice.
Okay. I thought that horse looked awesome the other day, and he overcame some trouble. He overcame some adversity. And if you just watch that slow-mo replay, and even I think it was Steve Bick that posted the cell phone video from coming down the stretch, he just looks like he could run forever. And,
we've talked about that on this podcast. Beautiful stride. Yeah. Imagine when Todd figures out how to get this horse out of the gate.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And maybe never does. Maybe it's the horse's thing. Who knows? And the Belmonts could be more for him. But those two have been most impressive. And I call a spade a spade. I think it's a very top-heavy group right now. And we'll see how things shake out over the next few weeks.
What have you made of, we mentioned the filly, Hoosier Filly. You've called both of her starts. And what have you made of her and seen of her as a 2-year-old?
There's the old eye test versus the number argument. Her numbers are solid, but they're not world beating. And so I'm a little dubious, little skeptical. But she wins the races the right way. So we'll have to see how she, She's in a barn that knows how to win the Oaks, so it's not like there's some worries there.
In fairness, the 3-year-old fillies, or this crop at least, at age 2 and 3, nobody's really put forth this jaw-dropping speed figure monster performance.
And it's interesting because if you think about, I mean, how many years over the past, let's say the last 10 years, you look at the PPs of Oaks horses on the road and you're always like, man, these are slow. And it's sort of counterintuitive because the argument is that fillies mature earlier than boys.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, though, it doesn't seem to like totally pan out numbers wise. And then eventually as they get older, I mean, they'll start to run faster races. So this is maybe a mistake. I don't put as much stock in numbers with the fillies as I do the colts. So yeah, I'm with you there.
All right. So I left off, one of the big horses is an Arabian Night. What did you make of his performance a couple of weeks ago at Oaklawn? And then, clearly, I think the favorite going in on the road to the Kentucky Derby.
Was just phenomenal. There's no two ways about it. Had the looks of a horse that can do anything. When they look like they're taking heat and are doing it comfortably, and then shrug off challenge after challenge as if nobody was there. You know the horses that do those sorts of things. They win races like the Derby and then the Triple Crown. I mean, he just has all the tools. So we'll see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. There's a Future Wager Pool 4 this week. Kicks off Friday at noon, and then we'll close Sunday at 6 p.m. You can get all your wagers in on twinspires.com. Or if you're in the Louisville area, come on out to Churchill Downs. Hang out up in the Aristides Lounge and in the Gold Room. And Travis, you're familiar with that Aristides Lounge. You've been the voice of the Derby draw for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
How much preparation goes into that draw?
A ton, maybe even more than the race call itself.
Yeah.
But I think those little tidbits, though, people appreciate, and it's cool. So many things are talked about. Everything is dissected. If you can find a unique little angle on a horse that just somebody had never heard before, I think it just makes it that much better.
Well, it's like a simple process, you would think, right? You're just drawing out pills and there's horses. But in that room, it's, there's a lot of nervous energy.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's always, and you're always keeping an eye on the big favorite. Is the rail been taken yet or not, or post 20 or what have you? And make sure the numbers are announced right. And yeah.
Hey, just a quick side note. We were talking about Arabian Night, going back to the Baffert barn. We've talked about it on the podcast. The Triple Crown nominations have been released. You can get free Triple Crown nomination past performances at brisnet.com. If you're looking for it, go to my Twitter handle at Derby Media. There's a link on there. We've talked about how you want to have a horse breezing by Super Bowl Sunday, and Cave Rock is still not breezed. And you notice in this year's Future Wager, we don't have Loggins and we don't have Extra Anejo because they have not breezed. So if you're 3 very talented horses that will be up against it to make the first Saturday in May.
And the Super Bowl's a week later this year.
It is a week later. So you take that into consideration.
It should be the Pro Bowl.
Things are getting real
It's now Pro Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, Pro Bowl
Flag
Sunday.
Football Sunday. Yeah, Flag Football Sunday.
Who do you like in the Super Bowl, Travis?
I'm a Giants fan, and who in America can possibly root for the Eagles besides people in the greater Philadelphia area?
I would, as a Cowboys fan, I would totally agree. Go
Chiefs.
Chiefs.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Chiefs. KK, who do you like?
Well, someone from the greater Philadelphia area. I think we know who my rooting interest is to. And
when did you become an Eagles fan? Was it a couple years ago when they won that Super Bowl?
Yeah, I jumped on the bandwagon. My favorite part about the Super Bowl is I just read an article that there's a Kansas City Chiefs bar in Philadelphia where, the fans go and watch football on Sunday. They're closing it for Super Bowl Sunday because they're afraid that the Eagles fans will attack the bar, which is, par for the course for Eagles fans.
Yeah, that's why we all have to root for them. What a great group of people.
Come on, Mahomes.
It'll be a good game. Let's leave with this, Travis. The Kentucky Derby, obviously, the most special race in the world for a lot of us. What does the Kentucky Derby mean to someone like you?
That's a great question. When I was a kid, it was the one race you had to watch. And there was a couple of different little things that contributed to it. Daily Racing Forum used to do this tracking 2-year-olds where like every week they'd give you an update on a 2-year-old, and I used to read it religiously. And then one of them was Jack Flash for Zito, and he got to run in the Derby. So I felt like I'd been reading about this horse the whole time leading up to it, and you could feel sort of that buzz, the excitement. Other little things like remember the breakfast at the Derby, breakfast at whatever it was
on
for
ESPN
for an hour every morning. You felt like you were there, and it was just this event and this moment that you had to be a part of. And then when I got into race calling, obviously the greatest challenge and honor in my profession is to call the Derby. So it is something I work really hard at to not take for granted. As you guys know, when you are in the weeds on an event like this, it can sometimes be stressful and irritating and annoying. But when you extract yourself from that sort of circle and you talk to people outside and they love it and they recognize it and they want nothing but to be a part of it, it sort of brings you back to earth. And so it's just a great event. And every year it's always a different story, different theme, different weirdness, but it's always fun.
And when you go around town here in Louisville, people find out you're the voice of the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
You didn't get that when you were calling it the wintertime in Aqueduct.
No, I'll say, and this is true. So if anybody asks, what do you do? I call races. Oh, where do you call? And so whether it be, and this is no knock to them, Louisiana Downs, Monmouth, Aqueduct, it was always, oh, that's cool. But when you say Churchill Downs, everybody's eyebrows go up.
It's a game changer.
It is. Yep.
So at the bar at Double Dogs, you probably get a free drink every time you walk in there, right?
I think Darren gets more freebies than I do. But I don't need free drinks at Double Dogs. I have enough at Double Dogs.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Special thanks, Travis, for coming in to experience Churchill Downs in the off season.
This is quite the scene here. Looking forward to this new paddock.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's done.
It'll be done. It'll be great.
Done.
Okay.
It's on track.
Yeah. It'll be great. As
You
John
guys are in
Asher,
PR.
as John Asher always says, maybe on opening night there'll be someone with a paintbrush, but it'll be done and ready for racing in just 12 short weeks. That'll be it for us. We'll talk on Monday again and recap all 3 races on the road to the Kentucky Derby. Be sure to load up that twinspires.com account. Big weekend ahead, and we'll talk on Monday. Thanks for listening to Inside the Kentucky Derby.